Hi, this is a tutorial series to teach you how to make your first game in GameMaker in 3 simple steps. My name is Dr. Sky, and I'm a professor of digital media arts at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. This is step 1. In this video, you will learn a basic familiarity with how GameMaker works, how to implement some basic game mechanics, and how to add simple graphics to your game. Let's get started. First, download and install GameMaker. And after you have it installed and you created a login for whatever it asks you to get a login for, and you open it up, you should get a window similar to this where you see new, open, and import and tutorials. You're going to click new. You're going to click new game. You're going to give it a name. I'm just going to call this first game tutorial. Then I'm going to add today's date just because I like adding dates at the end of my file names. So 2023. There we go. And then you can click let's go. One moment. There we go. All right, so this is the workspace view in GameMaker. Over here on the right, you have your asset library. These are the things that will actually be in your game, like graphics, sounds, objects. And you'll get familiar with this workspace soon, but let's just get started with the game. Everything in your game, every area, everything that you see in the game is in what GameMaker calls a room. So over here in rooms, click the little arrow, and you should see a room that's already made for you for this new project, and you can double click that. It's called room 1, and here it is. It's just a black rectangle. Let's rename it something more appropriate. You can rename things by either right-clicking on the asset you want to rename and going to rename, clicking that, or you can just hit F2 if you have it highlighted. So I'm going to click rename. I'm going to call it something like R underscore uh, room 1, or I can call it just R underscore game. What I like to do is when I'm naming my assets is that I have the first letter lowercase and it indicates what kind of asset it is. This is a room, so it's lowercase r, and then I'm going to call this lowercase r, capital G for game, and then finish spelling game, R game. And here is our game. You can even test and see how the game looks already. Go to the top right corner where it says gx.games. Make sure to change that to test or Windows or Mac. And most likely with the version that you've downloaded, it will say test. So you'll select that. On mine, it says Windows. And then you go over here to this play button, and that's run. You can either hit F5 on your keyboard or hit run, and you can have it run. And it will do a test build of your game. And there it is. This is your game. It's just a black rectangle. Now, before we actually start building your game, I'd like to give you a few tips. First, I would encourage you to use GameMaker on a large monitor to give you space to manage all your assets and everything. Small laptop screens do not work well with GameMaker. So if you have access to a computer lab or a large monitor at home, please use that. And also, this is essential, in my opinion, this is essential that you use a good 3-button mouse. 3-button means left click, right click, and then the scroll wheel you can scroll up and down, and you can also click it, and that acts as a button. And you can just Google 3-button mice. They should be pretty cheap from Target or Amazon or from wherever. This one's a little more expensive. It costs about $30, but it has a really high dots per inch rating, a DPI rating, which gives me a lot of great sensitivity control when I'm moving around my mouse. But a lot of the shortcuts that I'm going to teach you to make your workflow go more smoothly will only work if you use a mouse. And if you're on a laptop, you will see a little button in the top called laptop mode, and you would want to turn that off when using a mouse. Now, if you have a Mac mouse that has that little tiny dot scroll wheel, those are horrible. Don't use them. You can just buy any mouse and plug it into a Mac or a Windows machine, and they will all work on any machine. So go ahead and buy yourself one. It is worth it in GameMaker. So back to making your game. Here is your first room in the game, and we're going to resize it. If you don't see what you see over here, you can either click on this tab to bring it back up, or if you ever lose it, you can close it and then go over here, double click and reopen it again, and you should see room settings or room properties. We're going to change the room width to 780 pixels and the room height to also 780 pixels to give us a square. And the first shortcut you're going to learn is zooming in and out of this room view. If I just scroll on the scroll wheel, it moves up and down. But if I hold Control or on a Mac Command and then scroll in or out, it does fast zooming that way. Also, with a clickable 3-button mouse. If you click and hold the scroll wheel and then move around your mouse, you can move around your room, and this works in the workspace view of GameMaker as well. So I can zoom out and move it around, zoom in, move it around. Also on the top, you'll see a zoom out button, zoom in button, zoom equals button, and then zoom to fit button over here that you can use and mess with that. Over here, see the layers section of the room editor? Layers work like in image editors, where layers, things placed in layers that are higher on the list appear on top of things placed lower on the list. You'll see this background layer. We're going to click this background layer. We can change this background color from black to a different color. See this color bar right here? Click that, and you can change the color. I'm going to change it to a dark blue. I'm going to click OK. And now if I run the game, our room has a blue background. Close out of that. Now, the graphics that you see in your game are called sprites. I'm going to close out of this room editor tab by just going over here, clicking the X. And we're going to make our first sprite or thing that we see in the game. And then we're going to teach you how to place it in your room. So over here where it says sprites, right click on sprite, go to create, and go down to sprite, click that. The name is already highlighted, so you can change the name. Let's change it to lowercase s and call it block, S block. And over here under size, we're going to click this resize sprite button, go to resize canvas and change it to be 60 and 60 and click apply. That just changes the size. And now we're going to click edit image. We're going to click the fill tool and choose a color. I'm going to choose just bright pink for now. It doesn't really matter which color you choose. And now I'm going to close out of the sprite editor, image editor view by clicking this, exiting out of this tab. And the last thing you want to do is over here, this tells us the sprite origin. The sprite origin tells GameMaker where to place its creation location. So right now it's top left, and you should see a little crosshair symbol in the top left. That tells GameMaker that if you place this sprite in the exact middle of your room, this little crosshairs will be what's in the middle of the room, and then your sprite will be drawn to the top, bottom right of that. But we don't want that. We want it to be in the middle center. So if you click middle center over here, you'll see those little crosshairs appear in the bottom right. Or sorry, not the bottom right, in the middle center. And that's where we want it, middle center. Exit out of that. Now, we can't immediately add that sprite to the room. I mean, we can, but it wouldn't do anything. But instead, we're going to create an object and put that object into the room, and that object is going to have that sprite that we just made. And now objects in games are like the things in your games. So if you think of a Mario game, Mario is an object. The Goombas that Mario stomps on are objects. The blocks that Mario interacts with are objects. In GameMaker, it's the same. So over here in your asset library, you will see objects. Right-click objects, go to create, find object, and I'm going to name it lowercase o, and then capital B block. Where it says no sprite, I'm going to click that. And then when it says sprites, I'm going to click that. And then where it says S block, I'm going to click that and select it. So now our object has an assigned sprite. And I'm going to exit out of that and open up our room, our game, double clicking on our game, opening up our room. And now making sure that I have the instances layer selected, I can now click and hold on O block and drag it into my game. The object is O block, and it's just one thing in your asset library. These 3 blocks in your room, these are called instances of this object. Okay, think of this, instead of calling this a library, think of it as like a dictionary. And O block is a word. And if you have a word in a dictionary, it doesn't mean you can use it as many times as you want. So consider these words on a page, and this is your dictionary over here to the right. So and in GameMaker, we call these instances. And over here, we call these an object. So if we click run, you should see that our objects are now in the game, these little pink squares. Now, moving around and placing these, it's a little awkward. Thankfully, we have this toggle grid button over here. If you turn off toggle grid, you can sort of place these anywhere you want. If you turn on the grid, they will snap to wherever the grid is. And because these blocks are 60 by 60, you should consider changing your grid for this instances layer by clicking this little drop down arrow and changing the grid to be 30 by 30. That's half the size of our blocks, and it gives us a nice size so that you can like line them up like that if we wanted to. Now we don't have to right now. I'm just going to move them. I'm going to close out of our game room view. So now we're going to learn about how our objects in our games do things. So we're going to double click on O block, and we're going to add an event. Now events are things that happen but with objects in our GameMaker game. We're going to click add event, and we are going to click create. Now you're going to get this little window called scripting preference, and it's going to give you two options, GML code or GML visual. Visual is GameMaker's drag and drop game making system, which we don't want to do. We want GML code. You're going to have so much more control if you learn the scripting language in GameMaker, so that's what we're going to learn. Make sure that is selected, and also go down here where it says don't ask again for this project. Check that, and then click OK. Now we have a create event. A create event is something that occurs exactly once when that instance of an object is created. So whatever code that we write in this window will happen once, and then it won't happen again after that instance is created in our game. You will see these little slashes here. These slashes allow us to write comments about our code that doesn't act as actual code. So I'm going to highlight and delete all of that, and I can write double backslash and write here is a comment. This will be ignored. So when our game is made, this does not act as code. And it's important to comment on your code so you can keep track of what you're doing. So let's make our blocks move up in our room. I'm going to add a comment here. Make the block go up, double backslash. Speed is a built-in property of objects, which is why it turns green. I'm going to move this to be a little bigger. And then I will write speed equals to semicolon. Semicolon tells GameMaker that this is the end of the line of code, and it's important to use semicolons appropriately. I'm going to write another comment. Direction is also a built-in property of instances. 0 to 359 degrees. 0 is right. 90 is up, 180 is left, and 270 is down. Direction equals 90, which means up. But I can also say 100 or 113 or 5 or any number from 0 to 359. So it's a total 360 degrees. So this is telling GameMaker to make our block move up at a speed of 2 pixels per frame, and our game runs at 60 frames per second. So it'll move up 2 pixels 60 times in 1 second. And then we're telling it, GameMaker, to move our block up. And now if we test run our game, you will see our blocks moving up. Now let's delete everything in this create event because I'm going to show you another way to do this exact same thing. Click add event, go to step, and click step. This is a step event. Step events occur every step of the game, or every frame of the game, or every tick of the game. Now, the default in GameMaker is that games run at 60 frames per second. So any code that we write in this window will occur 60 times per second. I'm going to delete these comments and write move up 2 pixels every frame. And then I will write y equals. Now, y is the vertical position of the block in the room. Let me open the game room. So when we're telling the block where to be in the room, the vertical position is its y position. Now, a funny thing about GameMaker, it's not really funny, it's pretty standard, but just to let you know that this top part of the room is 0, and then it increases. This is 30, this is 60, this is 90, this is 120, and it increases all the way to our room height, which is, if you remember, 780 pixels. So if we tell GameMaker to put this block at 700, it'll be like around here. If we tell GameMaker to put it at 0, it'll be here. So what we want to do is make this block's vertical position, or y, a new value, y minus 2. So every frame, it'll check its current position. Say its position is 30. So it'll say, hey, 30 minus 2 is 28. Let's make our new vertical position 28. And then the next frame of the game, it'll say, hey, 28 minus 2 is 26. Let's make its next location 26 pixels from the top. So let's run the game. And they move up at the exact same speed. X also is a built-in variable of instances, and X means the horizontal position, where 0 is the left, and then it increases as it moves right, and you can do something similar. All right, let's change this to make it a little bit more programmy or a little bit more elegant. Another way to write this exact same thing would be, let's delete it first, delete all that, y minus equals 2 semicolon. This does the exact same thing. Writing minus equals just says, hey, to GameMaker, hey, subtract 2 from this value and then make that value the new number for this variable. So this does the exact same thing. Y minus equals 2. Let's run the game and you will see it moves up beautifully. Similarly, you can do this with X, and also with this utility of minus equals, you can do things like plus equals, and it adds values to variables. You can do multiply equals and minus equals. Next, let's, instead of writing 2 here, let's make this a variable that we can alter. Back to the create event, we are going to create a new variable. And now a variable is just like an algebra. It's something that represents something else, and we're just going to give it a name of SPD. Now we're not writing speed, because speed is a built-in variable in GameMaker. It means something very definitive and concrete, and we can't change that very easily. So instead, we're going to write SPD equals to, and SPD stands for speed. This is our movement speed. I'm just going to add a comment. And remember, anything following these double backsplashes will be ignored. And instead of 2 here, now we can just replace that with SPD, speed. Now, a create event, this code happens exactly once, and it creates this variable, gives it the value of 2, and then every frame of the game, we have this variable that represents the number 2. And if we run our game, it should work exactly as it has before. All right, let's move on, but let me briefly explain why we do things like this. We give values variable names so we can manipulate them and change them later in the game. And you're going to see how that's going to work in our game that we're making in this video. We're going to have variables that alter movement speed and things like that. And we're going to have, the only way you can do that is by giving them variable names. So now let's make it so these objects disappear when your mouse touches them. So back to the step event, we're going to add a new comment, this up here, when mouse touches it. Now you're going to learn about a condition. A condition is something that GameMaker checks to see if it's true. And if it's true, it does the instructions that you write. And you start that by writing if. If, space, and then open parentheses, and close parentheses, and anything you write within these parentheses are what GameMaker is going to check to see if it's true or not. And then afterwards, I'm going to hit return or enter, and open curly bracket, then I'm going to go down a few lines, close curly bracket, and then anything you write within these curly brackets are the instructions or the code that GameMaker will do if this condition is met. So if this, then do this. And what we're going to write is if distance underscore to underscore point, open parentheses, mouse underscore x, comma, mouse underscore y, close parentheses, is less than or equal to 0, then within these curly brackets, always make sure within curly brackets we're going to do appropriate indentation by hitting tab and indenting one level. So tab, instance underscore destroy, open and close parentheses, semicolon. Notice you do not add a semicolon here after conditions because it's not giving any instructions. This is checking to see if a condition is met. If this condition is met, then it will destroy this object or this instance of this object using this function called instance destroy. So what this does is that this is a function called distance to point. A function is sort of a built-in superpower that can be used, and it sort of simplifies the coding process to have these really cool functions. This function distance to point checks an x and y location, or a vertical and horizontal location, horizontal and vertical location of something, from away from this object. It draws a line from that object to whatever this x and y location is, and here it checks to see if it is less than or equal to 0. So if our mouse is 30 pixels away, it'll say 30 minus 30 is 30 less than or equal to 0? No, ignore. If our mouse is 20 pixels away, it'll tell GameMaker or ask GameMaker, hey, is 20 less than or equal to 0? No, so it's not going to do anything. Hey, but when our mouse is right over the object, it's going to say, hey, is 0 less than or equal to 0? Yes, that is true. Destroy our block. So let's run the game, see if it works. Yep, yep, yep. A lot of your game is going to be these condition statements. And a lot of your game is going to be using functions. Functions are these actions that are built into GameMaker. And the information we give some functions, like this distance to point function, are called arguments. An argument is just information you give to a function to help that function work. So most functions look like this. Basically, function name, open parentheses, argument 1, argument 2, argument 3, etc. Now with instance destroy, it doesn't require any arguments necessarily. You can add an argument here or different arguments, but we don't need to. If we just want to destroy this one object, we can just write open and close parentheses and then end it with a semicolon. All right, next let's add a little game over so our game restarts if any of the blocks get to the top of the screen. Write a new comment, restart game if it floats too high. If y, meaning the vertical position of this block, is less than -40, close parentheses. Return, open curly brackets, go down a few lines, close curly brackets, game underscore restart, open and close parentheses, semicolon. So as you remember, I'm going to open our game room here. This top part of our room is 0. And then that vertical position increases its number as it goes down this way. So down here is 780, this is 0, and -40 would be above, like right around here, meaning above or outside of the room. So this is telling GameMaker, hey, if this block gets to higher than -40 or higher, -40 or -50 or -60, if it gets above this line, this imaginary line of -40, then restart our game. Let me move this. As you can see, I'm moving our game room and our game views around using our 3-button mouse. I'm clicking the scroll wheel and moving things around. I'm zooming in and out by holding Control or Command and using the scroll wheel. And then I'm clicking and holding these objects to move them around. That's why it's so important that I think that use a 3-button mouse, and that if you're on a laptop, to click a laptop mode and turn that off. So let's test that. We'll see if our game restarts, if one of these blocks makes it outside of our room. Yep, restarted. So game restart is a fantastic function. Also, we could have written room restart because we only have one room. Both would do the same thing. Room restart is another great function to know. And next, let's make the blocks so that they keep appearing. So it's not just those 3 blocks. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go in here in the instances layer, and I'm going to click each object and hit the delete key on my keyboard and remove them. Back over here, I'm going to close out of this. I'm going to create a new object by right-clicking objects, going to create and going to object and naming it O control. Now, before I do anything, I'm going to make sure this object is in our game. So these objects, their code will only run if they're in the game. So here in our game room, I'm going to go over here to OControl, and in the instances layer, making sure that's highlighted, I'm going to drag OControl in here. Now you'll see a little question mark because it does not have a sprite assigned to it. We don't want to give it a sprite. We want it to be invisible. In this view, we will not, we can see the little question mark so we can see where it is. But when we run our game, you'll see that question mark disappears and we don't see anything. And that's the way we want it. It does not matter where you put this object. Close out of that. So a cool way to make things happen in sort of a timed way where we want a block to appear, say every second or every 2 seconds, is to use what's called an alarm event. So go to add event, go to alarm, and under alarm 0, click that. Delete these comments. And we're going to use a new function called instance create layer. Now, an instance underscore create underscore layer, this function, what it does is that it can create instances of objects. And what we want it to do is to create a new block. So down here at the bottom of our little scripting window, you will see a little shortcut about which arguments are needed in this function. So the first argument that's needed is its X location. Now, for an X location, we could write, say, 50, but this would make the block appear in the exact same horizontal location every time, which we don't want to do. We want the blocks to appear kind of at random at different points on the horizontal axis. So we're going to put another function within this function, which is something you can do in GameMaker, and that new function is going to be called iRandom_range. So iRandomRange is going to give us a random number between a lower number and a higher number. So right here after instance create layer, open parentheses, I'm going to write iRandom_range, open parentheses, 60, meaning the lowest value can be 60, comma, 720. The highest value can be 720. If you recall, our game is 780 pixels wide, so it will create a block somewhere between 60 pixels from the left to 720 pixels from the left. And then I will close out that function with a final parentheses. So that is the first piece of information for this function instance create layer. That's the horizontal position or the X position. Next, it needs a Y position, and I'm just going to put 820. Now, our game is 780 pixels tall, so that will put it below the room, 820. Comma. Now we need to tell it which layer to create this object in. We only have one instances layer, and it's called instances. So you're going to write quotes, quote marks, instances, close quote marks, comma. And the last argument that we absolutely need is the name of the object to create, which is oblock, close parentheses, semicolon. Now you're going to see this little error window disappear because it's all written correctly. And now what we need to do is make it so this alarm runs. Now this alarm will not run until it is set. You need to set this alarm. So what we will do is we will go to add event, step, delete these comments, write a comment, make a new block. If alarm square bracket 0 close square bracket double equals -1. So alarm 0, that's the name of the alarm with these square brackets here. Double equal sign is a way we check a value. We use single equal signs to assign value, and we use double equal signs to check a value. So if alarm 0 double equal sign -1 means, hey, is this alarm off? If it's currently off, it is set to -1. If our alarm is off, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, indent, alarm 0 equals 20. And it will give it a new time setting. Now, this is a number of game frames or game steps. Now, our game runs at 60 frames per second. So this makes it so 3 times per second, every 20 frames of the game, our alarm will go down, it'll create a new block, and then our alarm will get turned off, and then the game will see that the alarm is turned off, so it will set the alarm again, and it'll just keep setting the alarm every time the alarm gets turned off. Let's run the game, see if it works. Yep, 3 times per second, it is creating a new block. If I change this value from 20 to say 60, 60 frames per second means that this will make a new block every second, and run the game. You will see that it'll make blocks a little more slowly, once per second. We're going to make it so the game gets incrementally more difficult as time passes. And we're going to start making the blocks start to go faster and faster. To do this, we're going to learn about global variables. Global variables are variables that can be changed or get checked by anything else in the game. Now, to declare a global variable, we want these global variables created before anything else in our game so that they're always available to use. And one way I like to do that is to create a room before our game that appears before we get to our game. I call it a splash room or a title room. So we're going to right click on rooms, go to create, and go to room. And I'm going to call this our title. Now, currently, even though we have a game called a room called our title, it's not going to appear first. Our game room is going to appear first. The way we change that is you see this little home icon right next to our game. If you click that, this is the room order list. And if we click our title and then click and drag it up above our game, it will appear on top, and then it will get the new little house icon. That means our title will be the first thing to load up. Now, we're not going to test run the game yet because we need to change some things first. So first we want to change our title to be the same height, width and height as our game room, which is 780 pixels by 780 pixels, because the first thing that loads up in GameMaker determines the window size, and things can get kind of stretched and morphed if the sizes don't match. And then here underneath where you set room and height, you'll see a button called creation code. Now, rooms can run code as well, but they can only run code once when the room gets created. And that's perfect for declaring global variables. So right here in our title under creation code, we're going to click that and we're going to get a little coding window. And we're going to write a comment, declare global variables, global.block speed equals to semicolon. Then I'll write another comment, go to our game, room, go to, open parentheses, our game, close parentheses, semicolon. So to create a global variable, you write global and then dot or period and then the name of your variable. And we've assigned it here to be 2. And global variables, very useful. And in the games you make, you're going to use them a lot because they're variables that can be manipulated and referenced anywhere in the game. So after this variable gets created, then the game sends us to our game immediately. This is a fantastic function you're going to use a lot when you're making games. Room, go to, and then tell GameMaker which room to go to. Now you're going to see a little caution here for global.block speed because we haven't used it anywhere else, and GameMaker is always a little suspicious when we haven't used a variable that we have declared. Don't worry about that. We're about to go use it. So you can exit out of this, and to make it so you can see the room again, you can go over here where it says center fit and click that. Oh, boom, it reappears. But we're done with this room. We're going to close out of that. And now we can use that global variable. So let's open oblock. In the step event where it says SPD, we're going to highlight that, delete it, and write global.block speed. Now, if you remember, we declared global.block speed to be 2, so everything should run exactly the same as before. Now, because we're not using this variable SPD anymore, in the create event of oblock, where it gets declared or created, we don't need it anymore, so you can highlight it and delete it. Now, we're going to test run our game really quick. Everything should be working as before. It's moving up 2 pixels every frame. But now we are going to create a new alarm in our O control here. O control, double click that. We're going to go to add event. We're going to go to alarm 1 this time. And we will write a comment and say increase block speed and write Y. Oh, sorry. Then we're going to write global dot block speed plus equals 0.25 semicolon. So every time this alarm runs, it's going to increase this variable by 0.25. Now we're going to go to the step event and we're going to add a new line, increase the block speed if alarm1 equals -1, alarm1 equals 60. So this will increase the block speed once a second as well. Now I'm going to change this, make a new block to be like 30 or something for now. So this will run twice a second. This will run once per second. We will run the game and we should be able to see the block speeds gradually increasing. So right now it's at 2, but they should be getting faster and faster, which they are. In fact, in a moment, I'm going to let one of the blocks leave the room and you can see how much faster they're going. So see how fast they're going now? Now if I let a block leave the room, the game resets and we get the original speed variable. All right, play around with these values right here for these alarms until it feels right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set alarm 0 to be like 40, and I'm going to set alarm 1 where it increases the block speed to be 180, which is 3 seconds. So it'll increase the speed by 0.25, which is not much, every 3 seconds. It'll create a new block every 40 frames of the game. So anytime you change code, you should run the game, make sure it all works. It is working and the speed is not changing too quickly. It'll only change every 3 seconds and it will only change an incremental amount. Beautiful. Now these graphics look a little boring. Let's make things look awesome. Now, if you make an image for your game, you can import it into GameMaker as a sprite. For this project, I will let you use stuff that I've made from scratch for this game, but you can also make your own art assets. Just make sure that they're appropriately sized for this particular game project. You can download the images that I made from a Google Drive folder, and depending on where you're watching this video, you can find that link either in the video's description or somewhere else, but find that link, click on it, go and download all the assets of this game, which are images and sound files, and save it to some folder on your computer that you can find. Now, I already have them on my computer, so I know where to find them. For now, I'm just going to go to sprites. First, I'm going to exit out of O control. I'm going to go over to sprites, double-click S block, and I will click import. And I already have the assets here downloaded, and I'm just going to click on one of these block objects, S block 0, double click on that, and here we go. The sprite origin is still the middle center. It is still 60 by 60. Everything is right. If I close out of that and run the game, you will see our blocks will now look different. Yay, they're little red glitchy looking things. We can also add a background image. Right click sprites, create sprite, call this S background, go to import, find our background image, double click that, change the origin to middle center. And in our room, our game, double click our game, click the background layer where we changed the color initially. And instead of being a color, we can assign it a sprite. We're going to go where it says no sprite right here, click that, go to sprites, go to S background, click that, and now that's our cool looking background. And we can actually make this background move by tiling it. We're gonna, where it says vertical tile, check that. That just means that it's going to stack the background image on top of each other, such that if we have it move vertically, it'll just repeat. And for speed, for Y speed, we're going to set Y speed to be, let's see, what do I have here? 0.5 in my notes. 0.5, which is half a pixel every frame of the game. Now, if we run our game, you should see our background is there, and also it is moving down by half a pixel every second. If you want it to instead move up, just change this value to be negative. Instead of 0.5, make it -0.5. Now it moves up. You can also do this horizontally if you click horizontal tile and then change the speed to some number. But I'm going to go over here to Y and change it back to a positive number 0.5 because I want it to be moving down. We can also animate our sprites. So our block object, double click, our block sprite, double click that. And we're going to import all of the frames of this animation. So if we click import and then import all of these at the exact same time, you can click and drag to highlight all three. You can click and hold like shift button, click the end to highlight all of them, or you can like click with them and hit command or control and then select the other ones. Just make sure they're all highlighted, click open. If you can't figure that out, you can also just open one, and there's a way to add different frames, I believe, by going to edit image, somehow duplicate frame. Oh, maybe I don't know how to do that. Ignore that. Instead, just highlight all of them and import them. There we go. So we have these 3 frames of this animation. We're going to set the frames per second animation speed from 30. We're going to change that to 10. And if you want to see what the animation looks like, you see this little play button. You can click that and you can see the animation. Exit out of that. Run the game to see how it looks. Yep, we have our little glitchy block objects. We have our cool cyberpunk background. And now we want to give instructions to the player to tell the player how to play the game. And for that, we need writing. And for writing, we need a font in the game as a new asset. Go to, well, I'm going to minimize these like little drop down areas so it doesn't get too complicated. It's important to keep your work area clean, just like when you're working on a desk or table, to keep it clean and organized when you're making something. Do the same here. You'll notice that I'm exiting out of asset editors here in the workspace view, and I'm also minimizing things over here so everything stays nice and clean. Don't let your game project get too cluttered up. I mean, you can double click different assets and they'll stack on each other. You can go over here and then click this object and it opens up. And then you have too many things open, but I like to keep everything nice and clean and organized. Go over to fonts, right click font, go to create and click font. I'm going to call this font F Instruct. And you can select your font. Now this uses the fonts that are installed on your computer. You can actually download new fonts that your computer doesn't have by going to websites like dafont.com or other font websites. You can buy new fonts. I like to just use the fonts that are already installed on my computer, and different computers and different operating systems will have different fonts. On Windows, for this project, I like to use the font Menlo. Sorry, not Menlo, that's on Mac. Consolas. So let's go to C-O. Consolas. And on Mac, I recommend the font Menlo, M-E-N-L-O. Under style, I'm going to set it to bold, and on size, I'm going to set it to 18. And this is going to be our font for our instructions. Close out of that. I'm going to create a new object, right-click Objects, go to Create Object, call it O Instruct, click Add Event, click Draw, or hover over Draw, then click Draw. Now, draw events are ways to write code that creates graphics in your game, and that includes writing things visually. So now we have to give it some instructions to tell the game how we want these visuals to look. I'll write a new comment, set the font, color, and alignment. And it's exactly the way it sounds. Draw _ set _ font, open parentheses, F Instruct. That's our font. Draw set color, C _ aqua. Now there's preloaded colors and color names in GameMaker that you can use. You can actually see which ones they are by opening up the help manual, and one quick way to do that is to hover over something you want to investigate with your cursor and then clicking with the scroll wheel. If you do that, it will load up a browser window with the help manual, and these are the pre-named colors in GameMaker. In GameMaker, however, you can actually create your own colors. There's functions for that, and you can look up how to do that if you want to make your own color with specific color values. But for here, we're just going to use the color called aqua. Draw, set, H align, which is the horizontal alignment, FA _ center, make it center aligned instead of left aligned. Draw, set, V align, which is the vertical alignment. We're going to write FA _ middle. And then another comment, draw text. And then here's the really cool function, draw _ text. And in this, you'll see down here what arguments this function needs. It needs a horizontal position, a vertical position, and then some text to write in games and coding, we call text a string. So it needs a string of text to write. So where we want this to draw, well, we want this to create the text wherever we place this object. We can give it like concrete values, and it will draw that in that position in the room, 50 pixels from the left, 100 pixels from the top. But we want to create this text wherever we put the OInstruct object. So I am just going to write x, comma, y, comma. So this tells the game, hey, wherever this object is located, put that where we're going to draw the text. Then after that comma, quote, open quotes, burst blocks by hovering your mouse over them. Period, close quotes, close parentheses, semicolon. Then we're going to draw another line of text, x, comma, and this we want to be a little lower than the previous lines. We'll write y plus 50, comma. Open quotes, don't let them leave the screen, exclamation point, close quotes, close parentheses, semicolon. Let's see, anything that I need to explain here? Yeah, this is a string. That's why it turns yellow when you use quote marks. Strings can also be a type of variable. So say if we went into a create event here and wrote text1 equals, and then open quotes, here are the instructions, close quotes, semicolon, this becomes a variable that we can use. And we, instead of writing all of this, we could write text1. And it would use that string of text. So strings are another thing you can store as variables. However, we don't need to do that. We can just write it here. So I'm going to delete this. Don't need that. But we do need a create event. So in your create event, we need to tell GameMaker where to place this object. So the create event, as you recall, only runs once. And so this is a great place to like tell GameMaker where to place this object. So x equals room underscore width divided by 2. Now room width is a built-in room property. It checks to see what is the width of the room. Our game room width is 780, so it takes 780 divided by 2. That places it right in the middle of the room. So there's also a room height that you can use in your games if you want to reference room height, room width. This makes it so if later in our game development process we change the width of our room, it will always be in the center, regardless of what our room width is. And then y equals 100, which means 100 pixels from the top. All right, so last thing we need to make sure we do is open up our game and make sure under instances we drag OInstruct into our game. Dragged in, run the game. So there we go. There is our instructions telling the player how to play the game. Now, the player does not need this information for very long, so let's make it fade out. Go into the create event of OInstruct and write, comment, how transparent the text. 1 is fully visible, 0 is invisible. A equals 1. So we want to start it out so it is fully visible, so 1. New comment, a Boolean to tell the game to turn the instructions off when false. Show text equals true. Now here we've declared a new type of variable called a Boolean. A Boolean is something that is on or off or true or false. Here we set it to be true. It's like a light switch, on, off, on, off. A Boolean we can switch on and off, and it's a nice way to have things get turned on or off. And here we want our text to appear, and then after a while, flip the light switch to turn it off, and then have it fade out. So that is a great use of a Boolean. Now add event, go to step, create a step event, delete that, and write a new comment. Fade out instructions when show text is false. If show text is false, now you can write show text equals false here. That's one way to check if show text is false. You can also write, and this is what I prefer to do, write an exclamation point. In programming, we call that a bang, B-A-N-G, a bang. And that tells the GameMaker to check the opposite of what we're about to write. So if exclamation point show text is asking, hey, is show text false? If we remove the bang, this is asking, hey, is show text true? So if show text is false, you add the little bang at the beginning of show text, open curly brackets, close curly brackets. If, oh, this is where indentation gets important because we're about to write another condition within a condition. So that's why we want to always properly indent so we can visually keep track of things. Indent there. If a is greater than 0, which if you recall, when we create the variable, it starts at 1. So yes, it is indeed greater than 0. A minus equals 0.01. So that will decrease a every frame of the game by 0.01. Now, I'm going to show you something cool. Else. So if this condition is met, it will do these instructions. But if this condition is not met, it will do these instructions. This is called if else. If this is true, do this. If this is not true, do this instead. Else. Instance destroy. Open and close parentheses, semicolon. So what this will do is that if show text ever gets switched to off, we create it and it's set to true, but when it gets switched to off, it will start running this code. And it will check to see if a is above 0. If it is, it's going to start decreasing its value. And when a is less than or equal to 0, it will stop doing this set of instructions and instead do this instruction, which is delete the instructions. And let's see what else. Oh yeah. Lastly, we need to use this variable of a to make our text more or less transparent. So at the very beginning here, before we draw our text, we're going to use another function called draw set underscore alpha. Open parentheses, a, which is that variable, close parentheses, semicolon. Alpha means how transparent something is. If it is set to 100% or 1, it means it's fully visible. If it's 0, it's invisible. If it's 50% or 0.5, it'll be halfway visible or halfway transparent. So we've set this to A so that when it starts fading out here, this text will become more and more transparent until it gets to 0. Now it's important because draw events can affect everything else in your game visually. It's too complicated to explain in this video, just trust me on that. So whenever you mess with the alpha value of a draw event, at the very end of your draw event, or at the very end of where you want to stop messing with alpha values, write draw set alpha 1, which restores everything to 100% visibility again. So only this will be affected by transparency. Lastly, we need to make something switch this show text from true to false. And the easiest way to do that is just an alarm event. So add event, alarm 0, write show text equals false to set this to false. And then go back to your create event and set the alarm. Turn show text to false after a few seconds. Alarm 0 equals 300. It's important to put this type of instruction where you're just setting an alarm in like a create event, because if you put alarm 0 equals 300 in a step event, it will constantly refresh the alarm to be 300 and the alarm will never get to run down. But since in the create event it happens exactly once, this alarm gets set, then it can actually count down appropriately. So alarm 0 equals 300. So after, 5 seconds, it'll make our instructions disappear. So let's run the game, see if it works. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it started fading out, and it faded out. Let's add some visual polish to it, some visual panache, if you will. But what if you don't know a function to help you do that? Say we want to add a rectangle background underneath the instructions, and we want that rectangle to have rounded corners. You can use the help manual to search for new functions that people don't teach you about. So just go to help, go to open manual. It's going to open a web browser, and you can search for things. So here, if you want to draw a rectangle, I can just search for that. And look, we have functions that we can click on and learn about drawing rectangles. Draw events, drawing actions, draw self, draw rectangle. However, that's a drag and drop. That's not a function. If you want to learn about functions, you always got to look for things that are formatted like functions. Now this is draw, round, rect, color. That's too much. Let's try searching for scale, draw, text. Draw text transformed. Interesting. So this is the same as draw text, except we have additional arguments to like manipulate the text. That's kind of cool. Let's use that. Draw text transformed. Go to our draw event of oInstruct. And let's change this draw text to draw text transformed. But now it needs additional arguments. Let's go over here, comma. We're going to write a variable name that we're about to declare, so don't worry about that. The variable is called scale, comma, scale, comma, 0. So down here you can see the arguments that it needs. It says X scale, which means it's horizontal scale. How big do we want to stretch it horizontally? Y scale, how big do we want to stretch it vertically? And then angle, if we want to tilt it. Now we don't want to tilt it at all, so we're just going to keep the angle at 0, but we can manipulate how big or small this text is stretched with scale, which we will manipulate in a moment. But before we do that, let's go over here and do the same thing. Draw text underscore transformed. Over here at comma scale, comma 0. And then in the create event, write a comment how big the text should be. 1 is its normal size. Scale equals 1. New comment. When grow is true, make the text grow. When false, it will shrink. Grow equals true. Then in the step event, add new line, new comment, pulse text, or grow/shrink text. If grow is true, and the way I write that is just if grow. Now, if I want to check if grow is false, remember I add a bang before that. Or you can write if grow equals true. All of them are exactly the same, so do what makes sense to you. But I like just writing if grow. If grow is true, open curly bracket, close curly bracket. If scale is less than 1.05, scale plus equals 0.002, semicolon, else grow equals false, semicolon. And this is your first inline condition statement. Now, here we make our condition statements sort of stacked, and we always do new lines to visually make sense of them. But if a condition is small enough, short enough, you can just write it all in one line like this without curly brackets, and it'll work exactly the same. If scale is less than 1.05, make scale bigger. When scale is equal to or greater than 1.05, turn grow to false. And because this is checking if grow is true, it'll stop doing this. And then we can write here else, open curly brackets, close curly brackets. This is pretty much saying grow is false. I add a little comment there. A new inline condition statement. If scale is greater than 0.95, scale minus equals 0.002, semicolon, else grow equals true. So what this will do is that if our scale, if grow is true, meaning we want the text to grow, it'll check to see if it's less than 1.05. It will increase the scale of the text. And then once it hits this value, it'll switch grow to false. And now grow is false. It'll start shrinking it. And it'll go back and forth, back and forth. Now let's check to see if it works. Yep, it's growing and shrinking to the amount of 5% bigger and 5% less. That's what this is. This means just 5% bigger. This means 5% less than its standard size. So lastly, let's also add a black background to the text because it's not very visible. In the draw event, move draw set alpha here to the very top of the draw event. And then write the following code before anything else regarding the text. So here we're drawing like the text, we're setting the text color and stuff. So all of this is regarding text, so we're going to write all of this before that, because in draw events, whatever gets written first is what gets drawn first, and then everything that gets written after gets drawn on top of that. Since we want this to be a background, we need to write it first before anything else. New comment. Draw set, new comment, black background for the text. Draw set color, C black. Draw round rect, meaning round rectangle, underscore ext, which means extended. So there's a function called draw rectangle that we can use, but we want this to have rounded corners, so we can draw round rectangle and draw a rounded rectangle. Or if we want even more control, we can do the function draw round rectangle extended, which gives us more control. So we're going to give its values of where to draw this rectangle, and we're going to create hard values where we want it to be drawn in the room. And down here, you'll see the information we need to give it. We need to give it information for its top left corner where we want it to be drawn, and its bottom right corner, so it knows the size of the rectangle. And if you ever want explanations about how these functions work, go ahead, just hover over the function, click with your scroll wheel. It will open a browser window, and it'll tell you everything that you need to know about that function, even example code that you can use. But here I want it to be its top left corner to be 20 pixels from the left, 50 pixels from the top. Then I want its bottom right corner to be 760 pixels from the left and 190 pixels from the top. We want the radius of the rounded corners to be 30. And then the angle, we just want it, the outline, we want it to be set to false. So you can write 0 here, or you can write false. The exact same thing. I'm going to write 0, semicolon. Then we want another rectangle. So this is going to be our black background, but I want an outline around that black background. Draw set color C aqua. Draw round rect ext. And we want the exact same values here. In fact, I can just copy and paste that whole thing, except change this 0 to a 1, which if you click on this function, you'll see that this is asking for if it's an outline or not. You can write the word true here, or you can write 1. It's the exact same thing. So this should all be all that we need. So let's run the game and see it. So now we have a black background, rounded corners, outline for it as well, and it should all fade out beautifully. Whew. Okay, you made it. That's step 1 out of 3 steps for making your first game and just learning how GameMaker works. And that's the point of these videos, is less about teaching you how to make this specific type of game, just more about how GameMaker works and how you can make the games that you want. And in step 2, we're going to learn about scores, adding sounds to our games, and adding keyboard controls to our game. So I will see you there.